The morning split open like glass beneath a tire, clean, then suddenly shattered. Sirens threaded through the neighborhood as neighbors peeked between curtains, and the camera of someone's phone hovered like a vulture. She stood on her porch, hands steady but breath thin, while a rumor sprinted faster than truth ever could. The accusation was simple and sharp, honed by suspicion. Missing funds, falsified records, a scheme she supposedly orchestrated with a quiet smile and a careful pen. She could taste the verdict forming in strangers' eyes, carved by bias and boredom. What they didn't know was the one detail that would buckle their certainty. Who stood behind her, quietly, professionally, and relentlessly prepared to peel the lie clean from the bone. Her name was Imani Brooks, a school counselor who measured her days in small victories, a senior deciding to apply to college, a sophomore steering away from the gravity of a fight, a sixth grader who finally admitted they were afraid to read aloud. The district office, a maze of beige hallways and polite smiles, often felt like a place where outcomes were negotiated before students ever entered the room. Imani carried herself like a promise, organized, kind, and relentless. She had come to believe that steady work and documented care could outlast prejudice, until it didn't. When the audit began, it was meant to be routine. Someone in grants flagged discrepancies in a fund that paid for after-school tutoring and hygiene kits. The spreadsheets were clean to her eyes, but the whispers were not. A new administrator, a man who introduced himself with a handshake like a warning, studied her with curious attention. He did not say the words, but they echoed anyway. Too confident, too visible, too successful. The emails started to change tone. Colleagues, once warm, now copied extra people on harmless threads. Meetings that had been quick check-ins stretched long, ending with vagueness wrapped in smiles. Then came the call. Report to the district office. A temporary leave while they investigated. No explicit accusation, just procedures and policies, delivered with careful politeness that folded the heat of suspicion into crisp, bureaucratic grammar. The neighborhood learned before she made it home. She watched parents' eyes widen, heard the click of a phone camera, and felt an old ache bloom. The feeling of being read as a problem before being understood as a person. Imani stood in her living room surrounded by the tangible evidence of who she was, stacks of lesson plans, a box of thank-you notes from students, a fridge crowded with Polaroids. None of it argued as loudly as a lie armed with institutional backing. She straightened the stack of audit papers anyway because neatness was a small thing she could still control. The story metastasized. An online community forum turned her into a headline, complete with grainy photos lifted from the school website. Anonymous comments hardened into certainty. How these things always happen. How some people climb too fast. How taxpayer money becomes bait. Imani scrolled once, then closed the screen, fingers shaking from the cold heat of it. Meanwhile, the district treaded water in official language. We are looking into it. No conclusions have been reached. Yet they arranged the stage as if a conclusion were inevitable, collecting badges, disabling logins, escorting her from her office with a courtesy that bit. The administrator who once smiled past her now avoided her eyes. A coworker returned. A borrowed book by leaving it on her chair after hours. What cut deepest wasn't just the accusation, but the choreography around it. The way systems learned to move without touching her humanity. She let herself cry, then wiped her face dry, as if clearing fog from a mirror. There were facts. There were timestamps. There were signatures that did not belong to her. There were vendor invoices routed to a separate account. She had kept copies, redundancies, and a paper trail because she had learned long ago that accuracy is a life raft for black women in rough water. She dialed the one number that had always answered. Her husband, Ezra, didn't look like thunder when he arrived. He looked like clarity. People often misread him, soft-spoken, measured, but the courtroom had taught him to wield precision like a blade. Ezra Brooks was a civil rights attorney with a well-documented history of dismantling lazy narratives and exposing the quiet machinery of bias. He didn't walk into the district office to bluster. He walked in to listen, request, and record. On the conference table, he arranged an atlas of evidence. The audit trail Imani had maintained, metadata logs pulled from shared drives, and a timeline that made the supposed discrepancies collapse under their own contradictions. He drew a quiet circle around the vendor account that had never passed through Imani's approval queue and highlighted the two signatures that did not match hers, confirmed by a forensic document examiner he had called the night before. Ezra's credentials and his reputation shifted the room's gravity. The administrator who had avoided Imani's eyes now cleared his throat and defaulted to policy. Ezra countered with precedent. He asked for preservation orders, cited whistleblower protections for a finance assistant who had emailed concerns weeks prior, and submitted a formal complaint about discriminatory handling. The story they had prepared to swallow suddenly had bones they could not ignore. Truth did what it always does when given air. It expanded. The district announced that Imani had been cleared of wrongdoing, then quietly noted internal irregularities elsewhere. The administrator who had studied her like a problem resigned. The finance assistant came forward with documents that confirmed what Ezra had mapped. Funds rerouted through a legacy vendor profile, approvals rubber-stamped after hours. The online forum edited its thread title. Few of the loudest critics apologized, but their comments shrank, last seen markers replacing confident paragraphs. Imani returned to campus to a hallway of small celebrations. A poster that read, "Welcome back, Ms. Brooks." A stack of sticky notes with wobbly hearts. A cafeteria worker who pressed an extra fruit cup into her hand without a word. She felt relief, yes, but also the residue of harm, the way trust doesn't stitch closed as fast as policy memos do. She made space for that truth, too. Ezra reminded her that vindication and healing are cousins, not twins. Together, they launched a scholarship with the recovered funds for students in the tutoring program, naming it after the finance assistant who had spoken up. Imani redesigned her record-keeping process into a training workshop for counselors. Across the district, teaching how to build resilient systems that protect the vulnerable from convenient suspicion. At home, she slid the box of thank you notes back onto the shelf. A new one sat at the top, written in pencil by a student who had watched the storm. "I knew they were wrong about you. I learned that being right isn't enough. You have to keep your receipts." Imani smiled, not because she loved the fight, but because she loved what survived it. What are we willing to challenge when a tidy story invites our silence? And when truth finally arrives, will we let it repair more than reputations? Will we let it change the rules?